So, Cherie, if you're ready.
Yep, I'm ready. Let's pray. Oh God, our Heavenly Father, you have blessed us and given us dominion over all the earth. Increase our reverence before the mystery of life and give us new insight into your purposes for the human race and new wisdom and determination in making provision for its future in accordance with your will. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Cherie. Amen. The spiritual survey is something that Winona put together as part of her, I believe, you want to talk about a little bit, Winona, how you came up with the survey?
Actually, when I was a graduate student, I did my research on spirituality my question was, does spirituality become more important as women age? And so I actually did a little bit of research on it, and I came across this survey, and at the bottom of it, it says where it comes from. I thought it fit what we're trying to do here better than any of the other things I had come across. And so I just saved it because I thought maybe someday we would be able to put it to good use. So when we started Breath of Fresh Air, in my mind, I was thinking, how do we connect with other women and get them to participate in a conversation about what is meaningful to us spiritually? And so this survey kind of addresses those questions. And that's how it came about initially.
And as I think I said in one of the emails, I'm sorry I email so much, but I'm a worrywart. I'm hoping that you review the questions, and as we go through each session, you might add some layers to your responses. Hopefully you'll see a change or a deepening of your spirituality as we go through this. So the first question, what gives my life meaning and purpose? Don't you know AARP talked about this month? If people that don't have purpose in life have a lot of issues. They have a lot of health issues, mental health issues, physical health issues when they don't feel that they have purpose. What gives you hope? How do you get through tough times? Where do you find comfort? Here's a tough one. Am I tolerant of other people's views about life issues? I think we see that in our daily living if you're exposed to the world. And I'm admitting people, so I'm a little slow. Do I make attempts to expand my awareness of different ethnic, racial, and religious groups? Do I make time for relaxation in my day? Do my values guide my decisions and actions? So as we meet today, I hope that those will be some of the thoughts that you have, and afterwards jot down some ideas or thoughts that you had and be willing to share them at some other point. Okay, at this point, if you're ready, Michelle, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself? I don't know, should I make you big?
Yeah.
Or...
I don't
know
know
how I do that. Speaker.
So first of all, I do live in a
you're on the phone
area, and if you start having a hard time hearing me, please give me a signal, because I'm going through my computer right now, my internet, but I can call in. I've got the number written down if I have to do that. It's more important, I guess, that you hear me than seeing me. But so far, so good. Hey everybody, so first of all, I'm so honored. Winona, thank you so much for reaching out and thinking of me. I have never been asked to tell this story before in my life. I've done a lot of public speaking in my life, and I've told a lot of other stories, but I've never told this particular story. And so I took it very seriously and really gave a lot of intentional time and thought to, and how do you tell a story like this? So I turned it into kind of a mindfulness exercise of my own, of getting very clear, it helped me clarify some things in my own life, actually, treating it like an exercise to try to figure out how to tell this story. There's a lot to tell in one's entire life story about their spiritual journey. So my name is Michele Zehr. I live here in beautiful Nelson County, Virginia, in Roseland. I'm out on my screen porch right now where I hang out most of the time. I live on 11 acres here in the woods all by myself, and it's quiet and peaceful, and it's like my little nature oasis. And I don't know if my bio got sent out, but I'm the founder of a nonprofit called the Center for Earth-Based Healing. And right now that's getting a lot of my energy. We've done trauma-informed ecotherapy, or I call it, we're moving away from the word ecotherapy to eco-healing programs. And it has traditionally been done for survivors of interpersonal violence, but that has shifted as well. So that's also part of the story I'll be sharing today. I actually think that telling the story is going to give you all a whole lot better idea about who I am and what I'm about. So I think I'm just going to hop in unless there's anything kind of basic that anybody feels like they want. And I am Winona and I met because she was doing an internship, like it was at the VA, I think. And we're both veterans, Winona and I. So that the veteran connection is kind of why this is all happening today. So I'm very grateful for that. All right, so I'm just going to hop in there. Thank you so much to all of you again for being here. This is so cool on a Saturday morning to be able to hang out with a big group of women talking about things that I wish we talked about more, but we often don't. And so I think this is a really cool sacred space that's been created here. So thanks to all of you who organized this. When I was asked to do this, the first thought I had in my mind was like, what's the one line I would use to describe myself spiritually? And I love the quote by a Jesuit priest. He was a paleontologist. He was a philosopher, that we are spiritual beings having a human experience. And I have to say that that captures how I feel about myself, my life, my spiritual journey, more than anything else that I've seen written so far. And I decided to let Mother Nature help me organize my story a little bit. And I'm going to talk about my spiritual journey in sort of 3 phases today. So kind of like how the caterpillar is born, right? And it's going along, munching on leaves, growing up to be a great, beautiful little caterpillar. And then all of a sudden that caterpillar goes into its second phase of its life and starts weaving a cocoon. It goes inside of that cocoon and just disintegrates into caterpillar goo. And this is really true. It's miraculous, actually. And then there's these little cells that are in that cocoon that something triggers them. And they're like, oh, it's time to start growing a new organism. And then those little cells start forming and that goo reforms into a butterfly or a moth. And then they come out of the cocoon and then they are transformed. So I'm going to talk about my story in 3 phases like that. So the caterpillar going into the cocoon and then emerging from the cocoon. And each phase has a couple of like little chapters to them. So I think context is really important. You all don't know me. I mean, Winona and I have talked on the phone a few times, but we don't really know each other. So I think it would be helpful to give you all just a few points about the big picture of who I am as a woman on planet Earth in the universe, to kind of give us all like a framework that when you hear stuff, you're like, okay, this is this context. So there's 3 things about me that I would like to share to give you some context. And by the way, I just launch and go and I get excited. So seriously, if anybody needs me to pause or repeat anything, just wave, okay? So context is everything, I say. And the first thing that I think is important for you all to understand about me is that I say life is like a warm, gooey chocolate chip cookie to me. So this has been consistent ever since I was born. And what I mean by this is there is an impulse, there's something in me that just absolutely hungers for the feeling of being alive, for the feeling of more life and more life. And it's sort of like biting into that amazing gooey chocolate chip cookie. And you're like, oh my God, this was the best bite I've ever had. And I need more. And I'm going to put more in my mouth right now. So like that's operating, that impulse around feeling alive and feeling like I'm living a life, that is operating all the time in me and always has been. The second thing, as I say, I sit at the center of the cross. So, you know, there's the cross that we all know about in Christianity, but there's a Greek cross that's kind of like a plus sign. And in my life, I sit at the center of this cross, and all four directions are pulling in opposite directions all the time. So I experience a lot of things that feel like they're oppositions, and yet they're all happening at the same time. So paradox comes up a lot for me in my life experiences and my spiritual journey. And then that theme comes out a lot. It's like the both and. And then lastly, I have a life motto, which is no regrets. And what that means for me is when I get to the point of my life and I know my life is ending, I do not want to have one regret for having chosen to not do something out of what I call fabricated fear. And not like life-threatening stuff, but stuff like, oh, I'm afraid of what people will think of me, or I'm afraid of, making a fool of myself in front of people, or I'm afraid of failing. So I have had an impulse in me that's been like, you know what? We don't want to regret not trying this now, later on in our lives, because right now I'm afraid of what somebody's going to think about me. So that has also been a very strong impulse in the person that I am. And I actually do think these three things I've shared about life feeling like a chocolate chip cookie, I sit in the center of a cross being pulled in many directions, and that I really truly live my life because I don't want any regrets at the end of it. Those three things all have been operating since the day I came out of the womb in 1973. So keep that in mind as I now kind of launch into phase one of my spiritual journey, which I call the caterpillar hatches. And I was born in 1973, so I'm 48 years old, almost there at 50. I'm starting to get AARP things in the mail already. And I like to kind of think about, for me, relationships, whether that's with partners or family, are a primary way that, my spiritual journey has woven in and out of. And then also the work that I do in the world, the career. And so I'm always going to kind of reference those two things in my phases, plus tell you spiritually where I was at this point in my life. It has been a wild ride. I'm going to tell you that right now. In my life, it has been a wild ride. So with my family in my childhood growing up, here's what I know for sure. If you had asked me, hey, what's your family like growing up, Michelle? Here's what I would have told you. And this is completely true, by the way. I was born into a home of love. We had a lot of family traditions around, like holidays in particular, and Christmas can be pretty magical. I have one sister. She's 3 years older than me, and she used to let me crawl into bed with her during thunderstorms because I was terrified as a little kid of thunder and lightning and storms. And both of my parents were Sunday school teachers at the Nazarene church that we attended way up in northern New York near Canada. It's a very rural. And they came to every soccer game and awards ceremony and parent-teacher conference and concerts and everything. So I felt very supported by my parents and the things that I was doing in my life. So this is all true. This is a completely true version of my childhood. And there was a whole other side of my childhood that I didn't have words for the first 32 years of my life. And I just thought was normal. So I didn't talk about it because nobody was talking about it. Excuse me. So I can also say that it was true that when I grew up, I was born into a home of terrifying violence, drug addiction, mental illness, poverty, racism, heterosexism. And I was the youngest in a family system that didn't know really how to cope with things in a healthy way. So there was a lot of bullying and psychological, emotional abuse, and codependency and denial and not clear boundaries. So again, all of this is true, right? It's not either my life was great and wonderful or it was horrible. It was all kind of mixed up at the same time. And I think a lot of people's lives are this way, personally. So from the very get-go, and this I'm covering from 1973 all the way up to 1996. So this was the first kind of 23-ish years of my life. My sort of life sense was that the world is not really safe. You have to stay on guard. And that for sure, women, people who identify as queer, people with black and brown skin, all of those people I was taught were lesser than, that there was a problem with those individuals. And at the same time, I was a little girl who grew up for the first 11 years of my life as basically acting like a little boy. I felt very much like a little boy. I would work on the cars with my dad. I would ride motorcycles. My dad taught me how to play music when I was 7 by ear. And so we would play music in a nightclub together when I was 7 years old on the organ. So I both grew up in an environment that I didn't feel safe and was taught that there was all of these problems with all of these groups of people. And at the same time, somehow was able to stay tethered to a sense of who I was. And I was a pretty confident little kid that, really did feel like I could handle whatever was going on in my life. I don't know where that came from, to be honest with you, because that's not the way it is for everybody. And I would say spiritually, during this first 20-something years of my life, I had what I would consider to be my first spiritual experience when I was 9 years old. And I remember going to vacation Bible study. I remember going to church and Sunday school as a little kid. And, my mom always had an endless supply of little butterscotch candies in her purse during church, which I always loved. This really cool little memory. But I was about 9 and we were standing up singing a hymnal. It was the end of the service. We'd moved to Oklahoma and we're attending a Baptist church at this point. And it was the end of the service where Reverend Sheffield was inviting people to come down and accept Jesus Christ as their savior and to be saved. And I don't really have an explanation for this, but I can vividly remember standing there singing to my hymnal. My parents and sister were standing right there. And it was almost as if a part of me was sort of hovering a little bit disconnected from my body. And I felt this tingling go through my whole body. And next thing I know, I am walking up to the front of that church, but I felt like something else was walking me up to the front of the church. And it surprised me, it surprised my family. There had been no prior discussion about this decision. But I did it. And so I was baptized the following Sunday. And so around the age of 9 years old, I kind of started looking towards spiritual things. Not quite sure what that meant as a 9-year-old. And for probably the next 3 years, was trying to figure that out as much as a 9-year-old could, right? Like, what is God? What does it mean to be a good person? What is all that stuff? And then at the age of 12, I started asking some bigger questions. I started noticing patterns and inconsistencies in life that just didn't make sense to me. So I started asking my parents a lot of questions like, why do you hate Black people so much? What did they ever do to you? What's wrong with gay people? What's going on with all this stuff? And I would ask my mom, why are we tolerating Dad's violent behavior? So all of these things that I was getting taught one thing at church, but then when I went home, my life did not look like that at all. And my parents could not give me answers that I could get on board with. And so I was seeing my little friends at school, like getting drunk and, partying, but then they go to church a few days later and be, acting guilty and repenting. And it was a very confusing time for me. And understand, not at no time was my thought, oh, those people are all going to hell. My thought was, oh my gosh, what's wrong with me? Like, I don't fit in here because I don't understand this. So when I was 12 years old, I walked away from organized religion. I mean, I was that sure at that age that this was not going to be the thing that spoke to me. I walked away from organized religion. And I also made the conscious choice that I was not going to follow suit with my family's belief systems around sexism, heterosexism, racism. Like, it didn't make sense to me, and I wanted to make up my own mind. So that was a pivotal kind of time of life for me. And at that point, after I left organized religion, it was sort of like I believed in a higher power, but that was about it. I didn't have any other kind of system or organization around that whatsoever. And I kind of hung out there for many, many, many years. And then the second chapter of this kind of first phase of the caterpillar, I call this chapter, I traded in, because the first chapter was, I was born with Fuzzy, my teddy bear, in one arm and wielding a sword in the other, because that really was the home environment that I was born into. It was both like, I want to be nurtured and I need to protect myself at the same time. And then it moved in more towards, went to college, got out of the house, and I traded in that sword for an M16, a socket wrench, and a rainbow flag, is what I like to say. And what I mean by that is, by the time I went to college, my mother did divorce my father after I left the house, and that was a good thing for all of us. And I went to school and got a bachelor's degree in instrumental music education and was a musician. And when I was in college, like, the light bulb went off and a woman walked into my life. Her name was Rachel. And I realized, oh my God, I am a queer woman. And I did not know this until I was 22 years old. It was not an option. It literally was not even on the list of options growing up. It wasn't talked about. It wasn't, I just heard some derogatory words like, oh, those queers, from my parents, but I didn't understand what that meant. And so that was a huge kind of like shift of like, woo, okay, there's a lot about my life that now makes sense that I didn't understand for the first 22 years. And just FYI, I do identify as a woman. I identify as a queer woman. I like the word queer because it makes people have to ask me what I mean by that. I am, for all intents and purposes, a lesbian. I will probably never be in a relationship with a man again. Gender-wise, I identify as genderqueer, though, because I do feel both the masculine and the feminine very, very strongly. But I'm cool with pronoun woman, love being a woman. Of course, all of that languaging didn't exist either growing up, as you all know. That's all new. So I met Rachel. Rachel had been deeply hurt by the church as well. In fact, her pastor actually physically struck her once, and her parents, who had adopted her, they disowned her because she came out of the closet. And so both of us were sort of like, that doesn't quite work for us. And I was totally cool with it, and so was she. I was lucky, though, because I did not carry the kind of religious baggage that she did around feeling guilty about being a queer woman. I never, ever in a moment felt guilty, never dealt with any like, oh no, I'm wrong, or I'm bad, or I'm going to hell. She had been taught that, but I had not. So, I was very, very lucky in that sense. So get through college, and here was the tricky thing. I had joined the United States Marine Corps on a program that I was in. I'd signed the papers. I was waiting to finish college and then go to boot camp. When I signed those papers, I thought I was straight. After I signed the papers is when I met Rachel. And now here I am, graduated. I'm headed off to boot camp, and I am a queer woman. in the military, don't ask, don't tell, don't harass, don't pursue, which was the law in place to say you're not allowed to tell people that you're gay, but they also can't ask you. Well, that law did not work, y'all. It did not work at all. The first night of boot camp, I started getting harassed for being a queer woman. And I didn't tell. You can just look at somebody and, kind of tell sometimes with people. And so that was really, really challenging for 4 years of not feeling safe. Some of the story, that in and of itself could be its own story, some of the stuff that I had to put up with. I am super glad that I joined and that I served, and I was a musician. I got to travel all over the world and do some cool things, but in an ultimate sense, I knew they were not going to have me for one day longer than what my contract stated, because I couldn't live in an environment where I was having to hide such a huge part of myself. And it was really unhealthy for me as well. So shortly after I joined the Marine Corps, I got a phone call in the middle of the night that from my mom, my parents were divorced, that my father had committed suicide. And I was 23, this was 1997. And, a lot of people have very strong reactions to suicide and that whole topic. But I have to tell you, I've had a long time to think about it. And I have landed in a place around it, particularly in my father's case. I actually think it may have actually been the most compassionate choice for him. He was tortured by his own mental illness. And I don't honestly believe he was going to be able to get help from the places that were in place at that time for him. So for me, I think that was probably a blessing in disguise that he was no longer being tortured by his own stuff. And something in me, my whole life has felt very solidly okay about the fact that he's not with me, witnessing my life for all these years now. And again, there's a lot of times when I'm going to say something in me. I don't know what that something is. Maybe it's my soul, or it's a knowing, or something. But this time in the Marine Corps was a lot happening, a lot relating. This was when I drove a nuclear submarine. I mean, I got to do some really cool stuff. And then I got out of the military. And again, I always had to follow what made me feel alive. Not what I call the script of you get married, the 2.5 kids, the minivan, the house, the mortgage, the corporate job. Like, I know that's probably what we were all taught was supposed to happen. And maybe it has for some of you, but most people that I know, that story has not worked out for any of us. And so I was like, okay, what is it that I feel like I want to do now? And so I got out of the Marine Corps, and the only thing that interested me was learning how to work on cars, to fix cars. I grew up doing that with my dad, and I was super interested, but I had never had the chance to formally learn. And here I am. I have a bachelor's degree in music education, but I'm so burnt out on music now. I just cut it out of my life. And I'm like, that's it. I'm done. I'm not playing anymore. I'm just going to go do this thing. So I found an associate's degree program and got a little degree. And I became the first woman in Oklahoma to work both as a technician at an independent shop. And then I worked at a Ford dealership in Oklahoma City as an ASE certified technician. That was very interesting because that is not a work culture that's very open to women being in there. Most of the time, the women are in the office doing the paperwork and the guys are out in the shop. So again, you'll notice there's a theme in my life of I'm always wandering around to these things that interest me, but they don't really follow what are traditional roles for women. But guess what? I had to follow my heart. That impulse in me was running the show more than my mind or the script. And, spiritually, I was sort of in a place of kind of hanging out, higher power, whatever, going on with my life. Didn't go to church, didn't have any rituals, any practice. And I did the whole automotive thing. I ended up going to Oklahoma State University and co-creating an automotive education degree program with a colleague of mine. The program's called ProTech. It's still out there on its second generation of instructors. So I basically taught little young teenage rednecky boys how to fix cars for a few years. You know, there was a day though. So like I made it, right? Y'all, I'm in a relationship. I've got the job. I've got the retirement plan. I've got health insurance, you know, so I've like made it. But then there was a day I drove to work and I was like, all right, this is it. This is your life. Are you okay with this? Something in me that hungers for more was not okay with that life. I couldn't imagine getting up and making that same drive for the next 20 years and teaching the same classes over and over and over again for the next 20 years. Something in me was like, this is not your final resting point. You got to keep going. And so again, this is my life. Living my life is the spiritual journey. They're not separate. I don't go do spiritual things and then go live my life. It's all the same thing. That's why I'm telling you these kinds of stories. So 2005 was when everything started changing for me. And I say this brings me into the next phase, the phase where the caterpillar has been out there munching and trying to figure out who I am. And then 2005 marks when that caterpillar got the signal to start weaving the cocoon, because it's all about to disintegrate. And, you know, after I realized I didn't want to teach at Oklahoma State anymore, Rachel and I, she had gotten a degree in culinary arts and was a great chef. And so we moved to Michigan where some friends were, and I thought I was going to get another degree. I kind of was looking at getting a PhD. And instead, I got an existential crisis. Was not expecting this to happen the way that it did. So at this point in 2005, here I am, 23, no, actually, by this point, I am, 2005? I don't know how old I was, 73, 93. I was 32. So in my family situation, my mom had basically gone crazy, partying, and alcoholism had now entered the picture. My father had been so controlling all those years, he controlled everything about our lives. So she never got a chance to dabble in alcohol because he controlled that. But now, you know, she's out having a good time partying. I had very little contact with my sister. We had never been close. And then Rachel and I were still together as partners, but I was starting to feel a little bit disconnected and I didn't know what was going on there. So what happened was I started grad school again. I was working towards a second master's degree. And this was in the social foundations of education with an emphasis in women's and gender studies. And this program like rocked my entire world. And what happened was this, summer of 2005, my very first class, Intro to Women's Studies. And Dr. Diane Logwood hands out this worksheet one day. And I sit there and I look at it and I felt the blood in my body rush. It was almost like it rushed out of my body and I couldn't breathe. What I was looking at was the, anybody who's in the field of like interpersonal violence or domestic violence, there's something called the power and control wheel. And then there's also something that shows the cycle of domestic violence, which, you know, very quickly it's everything's fine. Then there's the tension building phase. Then there's some explosive events where the violence is really bad. And then there's the apologies and I'm so sorry. And then there's the honeymoon phase. Everything's going to be perfect. I'll never do it again. And then we move back into normalcy, and then the tension builds again, and it's just the cycle, right? And this is what was portrayed on this piece of paper. I did not know until that moment that I had grown up in domestic violence. I did not know that all that stuff that I was like, oh yeah, violence and drug addiction, and it wasn't very safe. I didn't know that there was an actual name for it. There was a whole degree program that was focusing on this stuff. And it absolutely, I was speechless. How could I have missed that? Like something that big, right? And so that my entire life narrative of who I was, of my family, of the world at large, instantaneously shifted for me. And it was really overwhelming because I thought, my God, if I miss that, what else have I missed about myself and about who I am in this world? So I stayed in this degree program, and every class that I took, it just was like peeling back yet another layer of the onion. And it was really eye-opening because I suddenly started seeing how oppression operates in our culture, how I had participated in that unknowingly, why it didn't feel right to grow up in a home where every racial slur known to mankind was a normal word in my family. And like, I was not okay with any of it. And I decided I am the one that this stops with. It stops here. But how, right? So I had these bright ideas. Oh, I'm going to go save the world. I'm going to be some advocate, social justice person. And by the time I got to where I had 4 classes and my thesis left for that degree, I was in such a horrible state. All I knew was like, I don't know what one woman can do to change anything in this world. It is messed up and I can see it happening. My foundational sense of the world at this point in my life went from generally being optimistic and like there's a solution for everything to, oh my God, what mess have I found myself in? And it is hopeless. I was in complete despair. And that was a really scary, scary place for me to be. I had lost my faith in humanity. I wasn't sure what the point of life was anymore, or the point of my life. And that's a really scary place to be. I wasn't even sure there was a God anymore. Like, how could God let this stuff happen? And how could I not realize it? How could I have even been complicit in some of the oppression that I just didn't know about because I was taught about it? Like, how do I change this? And spiritually, the only thing that I knew for sure was I needed time to stop and pause and think. Like, I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what was going on in my life. I just was overwhelmed. So this led me to chapter 2 of this like disintegration phase. Like everything that I thought had been my life and my worldview was disintegrating now. Super scary. The second chapter is titled,
Michele?
You're gonna do
Michele.
what?
Michele,
Yes.
can I stop you there right there? I bet you that our group has some questions about the first part of your life, which it's already a movie in my head. I mean, it's just phenomenal. Like, you've covered everything that could happen to one individual. Does anyone have any, and I appreciate your openness and your honesty. I think that's amazing. Is there anyone that has a question for Michele before she tells us how she dealt with her disillusionment with Earth and people? I've got everybody muted, so check your mics.
I'll start. I am just amazed. The whole reason I read the prayer that I did this morning is it was a prayer for humanity, because I'm a pediatrician and I have pretty much lost my faith in humanity right now. So this is amazing. I'm really excited to see how you came out of that.
Thank you. Thanks for what you do, by the way. Whew. Any other questions?
Actually, I have a lot of questions, but I'll wait until you're finished because I'm a social worker, and I'm really interested in how people connect with each other. And Michele, I'm just so grateful to you that you were willing and brave and courageous to come today and to talk to women who you don't know and to talk about your spiritual journey in a way that I believe is healing, not just for you, but for all of us, that this is the world that we live in and we can do better. And you're showing us. Thank you for that.
Thanks.
So I'll chime in. Just,
I think that, Pat, weren't you trying to say something? Sister Pat? Yeah. We're not hearing you. Okay. Go, maybe you can put it in the chat.
Terry, I'll chime in to Michele to say again, thank you. I'm pretty much riveted to my seat listening to the next thing, just listening and I guess having my own parallels to some of what you're saying, but it's just so again, like everybody else, thank you.
Yes, thank you, you all. This is so amazing. What an amazing morning. It's raining. It's beautiful here. Yeah, thank you, you all. I really appreciate it. I'm glad this is connecting. You never know. Are you all ready for me to move on? All righty. So yeah, I needed time to think. Like my whole world had been turned upside down and I felt like who I had been taught to be was in no way, shape or form aligned with who I actually was. And that's a scary, scary moment, like to walk away from everything that you know in order to find yourself, right? So I did something, I think it's one of the most radical things I've done yet in my life. I had 4 classes and my master's thesis to go before I graduated, and I quit grad school. I literally could not go to one more class for one more day and listen to anything until I had time to think. And then I decided I needed to go do something that was really gonna just challenge me. You know, the Marine Corps was very challenging physically and I liked that. So I decided I was gonna backpack the entire Appalachian Trail. I had never backpacked. I owned no backpacking gear. I didn't even know where to buy it at the moment that I decided I was gonna do this. And my family was like, are you crazy? What are you thinking? You know, and so it took me a little bit of time to get them to come around. They did end up supporting me. And so once I quit school and this was like in 2006, I still had to get like all these part-time jobs because I didn't have the money to do this. And I had to buy all the gear and I had to educate myself that like something in me again was like, that's the thing, you have to do it. And I became ultimately focused on this long walk that I needed to take. I sold everything of value, like my air compressor from being a mechanic and my tools and I sold everything I didn't need. Got 3 jobs, started reading, started like researching and talking to people. And on March 11th of 2007, I stepped off from Springer Mountain in Georgia and I started walking north. And I had no idea that that was going to be the most radically life-changing journey ever. That is a threshold in my life. There was a distinct before and after. So the only time I felt hope in this time period of preparing was when I was focused towards the Appalachian Trail. Other than that, it was total despair, really dark, dark places that I was hanging out with because I just didn't know how to be a human being, a loving human being in this world at this point. And so this is when my spiritual story starts to take a little bit more form now. Within the first few weeks of hiking that trail, I had an online journal. It's actually out there. I journaled every day of that hike. Like, it's all out there. And people could send me emails. And a friend of mine who was just an online friend, we were in a backpacking forum together. So we had talked, but I didn't know him. He started emailing me and he said, hey, you need to pay attention to what the animals are trying to tell you. And I was like, what do you mean? What are you talking about? You know? And come to find out, his name is Mike Thompson. He was a Cherokee elder, lives down in Alabama, and a shaman. And he was a spiritual guide and a healer for his tribe and his community. I did not know this about the guy in the way that we had met. And so he kind of started sending me little hints, little things to like, hey, snakes, you're seeing so many snakes right now. Snakes represent transformation. They shed what no longer serves them so they can grow in to the next bigger version of themselves. You're seeing owls. Owls are messengers from the underworld. They can see at night and at day. So he started opening up this whole connection to the natural world for me that literally was like, once the switch got flipped, it could never get flipped back off again. And I did complete the Appalachian Trail. Now, granted, my life totally fell apart when I was out there. My relationship with Rachel ended after 12 years. I basically packed everything I could fit into my truck with my cat, and I drove away from Michigan, not knowing where I was going to live. You know, and I had to split my hike up into 2 years because things were pretty messy with the end of that relationship. So, and then I got into a new relationship. And so all of this stuff was moving and bending again. But finally in October 8th, which was actually yesterday was my anniversary of completing the Appalachian Trail. I finished it on October 8th, 2008. And the thing that experience gave to me, that deep listening, go out, you need time to think. So here's what it did for me. Have you all ever heard of the book, Women Who Run with the Wolves? It's a classic. Every woman needs to read this book at some point in her life. And I think it finds us when it's time for us to read it. It's about myths and stories of the experiences women have in life and how we are oppressed and how we even self-oppress ourselves because of the messaging that we learn. But the whole point is that all of us as women are on this path to discover and reconnect with the archetypal wild woman who lives in all of us. And that's who I met out on the Appalachian Trail. And it changed my life. Like, something in me got woke up, and I swear to you, I feel like a part of me is a wild animal, but there's also a part of me, this part of me who I met, she feels capable to everything and 100% safe and loved and perfect and solid and like unstoppable, right? So that's who I got to meet out on the Appalachian Trail. And I did get my faith back in humanity. And I realized that Mother Nature is where I connect to God. This is where I can communicate and where it makes sense for me and where I can get the messages come back to me through the things that I noticed when I'm watching. It was the most healing experience of my life, was to spend a total of 10 months out in nature, backpacking, almost totally by myself. And realizing, my God, I can handle myself out here. Like, I really can. And meeting that wild woman, right? And so that ends sort of the phase 2 of my spiritual journey. Like, everything fell apart. I met this part of myself and I was feeling hope again, but I didn't know what the direction was. Had no clue. And trust me, I never could have written what was about to happen either. Are there any questions before I go into the very last phase of my journey? Yes, Pat.
Michele, what's your trail name?
My trail name was certain. I was certain everything was going to work out somehow, some way. And that was given to me by a group of people that I was hiking with. And I accepted that trail name because I felt like you know, that part of me that is kind of sort of an eternal optimist, it has to work out. I mean, what are we going to do? Sit down on the ground and just, you know, throw a temper tantrum? Yeah, but I'm still in the same place and I still need to stand up and feel your feelings for sure, but then also get back up and keep walking. And so that's where that trail name came from. If you all are interested, you can, my whole trail journal is out there. It's on trailjournals.com. And if you just type that in the search box, you type certain, CERTAIN, the whole thing is there, including the year and a half it took me to get out there. I journaled because I just was in such a place. And I was very open and honest, just like I am here. I do believe in authenticity, and I think that's where magical things can happen with people interpersonally, is when we can show up authentically. So now I'm done with the trail. I've started a new relationship. I've moved to Charlottesville, Virginia. And phase 3, I call this, there is movement in the cocoon. I'm not saying yet that the butterfly has emerged, because this is the phase that I'm still currently in, I feel. But this covers from about the year of 2008. This little chapter that I'm about to share with you from 2008 to 2011. And I call this chapter the false sense of stability. So as far as family was concerned, now I had entered into a relationship with a woman named Karen. But in this time period, I am also starting to see some familiar relationship patterns that were of concern for me. And it's the first time that I'm actually seeing how the trauma that I experienced as a child continue showing up in your adult relationships. It's the first time I'm starting to make those connections about, oh my God, like I thought I had dealt with this, you know, years of therapy, you know, the things that we all do to try to heal ourselves. But relationships, as far as I'm concerned, are your best mirror for the stuff that is still bogging us down, that needs to be looked at. So that was happening. It was a beautiful relationship, but there were some concerns that I had, both with me and with her. It wasn't violent or anything like that. I never went down that road in my relationships, but there definitely were unhealthy ways of coping with things that I just didn't know. My mom's alcoholism by this point was becoming life-threatening at certain points, like she had been hospitalized, and our relationship was pretty tense. I was connected, but with a lot of boundaries. And by this point, I had become estranged from my sister. She actually cut ties with me. She and her husband were very much part of a very conservative Christian church. There were some issues around me being queer, but my sister and I are just two very, very different people. And I don't know how we were raised under the same roof. But that was kind of the status of my family situation. I did finish my degree in this time period. I went back to school at UVA, took the 4 classes, transferred them back. I did finish my thesis, and I wrote my master's thesis. I did an eco-feminist analysis of the Appalachian Trail culture and compared that to what Benton Mackay originally had envisioned for the Appalachian Trail. So like, I couldn't have actually written that paper had I not quit school to go hike. So sometimes our paths are not going to be linear. Sometimes they kind of wrap around and they go all over the place. And because of being in school, I was guided, and this crazy, all these little synchronicities happened. I was guided into the career that I started that I didn't even know existed. I got a job at SARA, which is the Sexual Assault Resource Agency in Charlottesville. And for the first time in my life, I was an advocate for survivors of sexual violence. And I thought I had found it. I had arrived. This was my final resting point. This is the work I'm going to do the rest of my life, because it felt aligned, right? Social justice advocacy, advocating for people who are oppressed, advocating for people of color, for people who are queer, of everybody. Like, everybody deserves to be loved and to know that they are perfect just the way that they are. So I felt totally aligned. So I'm over here trying to get, like, you know, my adult life going. And spiritually, that wild woman that got woke up in me, she wasn't going to let me off the hook and just say, okay, go back to your plain Jane life here. There was something in me that continued wanting more depth in nature, to go deeper within myself, to, where else can I go? And I ended up finding a book that I read called The Book of the Vision Quest. Now, the shaman who had guided me through my hike, he had called that hike a vision quest for me. And I didn't know what that word meant, but it intrigued me. And now, all these years later, I find a book that's called The Book of the Vision Quest, and I read it, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to go do this. This is the thing I have to do next. And it's through an organization called the School of Lost Borders on the West Coast, and they've been doing what's called rites of passage work since the 1970s. And a vision quest follows the same 3 steps that I'm using here: separation, initiation, and return. And I went out there. Actually, I'll get to that in just a moment. I just knew that I had to go do this thing. But I also was pulled again in 2 different directions between following this path that seemed really out there and being an adult. So this gets us now to 2011, chapter 2 in this like butterfly thing. And I call this, ladies and gentlemen, please fasten your seatbelts. Shit's about to get real. So in 2011, I'm covering now as time span 2011 to 2019. This is just until a few years ago. And this point, I experienced a spectrum of total despair to total blissful joy and hope. And my spiritual life really started coming into the forefront and becoming the primary driver of where my life was going to head next. So in 2011, I did indeed go out to the West Coast, and I participated in a 14-day program for women called the Vision Fast Ceremony. They changed the name as not to culturally appropriate something from indigenous people. And I spent 4 days and 4 nights alone in the high desert of the Inyo Mountains. I had 1 gallon of water, no food. We were fasting, sleeping bag, a tarp, and a journal. And for 4 days and 4 nights, I did not see another human being. I was out in the elements. It was just me and my thoughts and Mother Nature and water. And you set an intention when you do a ceremony like this. And my intention in this particular vision fast was focused on finding balance between the masculinity and the femininity in me. I was always I was much more masculinized because it was protective. It made me feel safe, right? I felt vulnerability and femininity. That was weakness. That was going to make me not safe. And of course, that all comes from childhood I had, right? And the world we live in. So in 2011, that was the theme: vulnerability and balance. Fast forward, I come home from that a year. Another time, a part of me, I had lost my job in the advocacy world, and I was really in a place of despair because I thought this was it, and all of a sudden it wasn't. And I needed to go back out to the woods again. So the woods, nature, started becoming the place I went to every time that I felt lost. 2012, I was called to go back to a part of the Appalachian Trail I hadn't been to in like 4 years. I had no explanation for this, but I listened, right? This is it. Listen, listen, listen to these things that we don't quite understand. So I go back out to this place, it's in Virginia, and I'm out there just camping for a week. And this in itself could also be another entire story, but I experienced something out there called a spiritual emergency. Now, there used to be something called the Spiritual Emergency Network because there were a lot of people that actually experienced stuff like this. It's no longer around, but essentially, I saw an owl kill a woodpecker while I was out there in the middle of the day, which was strange. And hours later, I walked down to the stream, and there was this woodpecker. It should have been carried off down the stream to the river, but it wasn't. And it had been caught in this little eddy, and it was just spinning, and it was dead. And I went and I scooped up the woodpecker, and I looked at it, and that little dead woodpecker became the messenger of a question. that when I asked myself that question, which was, if I never came out of the woods, ever, who would ever know that I existed? Who would care? What would my life have meant? And does any of it matter? Why does this matter? And so, oh my gosh, y'all, I don't know. This something happened. I took a nosedive into the deepest, darkest, shadowy, scary depths of despair within myself that I have ever been in, ever. It was a very scary time in my life. Came out of the woods a week later. My partner, Karen, came to pick me up. She took one look at me and said, "What happened to you out there?" And I'm like, I don't know. I didn't have a name for it at the time. I'm not sure, honestly, I would be here if it weren't for her. She really, really helped me and found some people to help support me through this. Basically, I just realized that the whole construct of the whole thing all over again was a construct for me. And I didn't know who I was again. The other thing that happened related to nature and my spirituality was that I had always been interested in primitive skills, and I'd searched for years and years and years for schools and never found anything. And after I got back from that first Vision Fast, I Googled again, and boom, there was the Tracker School up in New Jersey. And I had already been enrolled in a class. So even though I was feeling horrible after this spiritual emergency, I still went to the Tracker School and took that week-long class. And there was some spiritual paths and narratives with what I was learning, and the tiniest specks of hope found me at that school out in nature, where I was like, okay, I'm not going to end it. I mean, it was really that dark at this point in my life. So while I was at the school, I was meditating in the woods and asking, what do I do next? What am I supposed to do here? So this was all 2012. Fast forward to 2013, you notice this is all spiritual. All of this is driving my entire life at this point. Again, I have no explanation for this. I somehow became very curious about plant medicine that I had never grown up around. My dad was a prescription drug addict, but I didn't know that growing up. But no drugs, no nothing, zero experience. I've never even smoked a cigarette in my life. And all of a sudden, here I am feeling this impulse towards exploring plant medicine. And the particular medicine that I was drawn to were psilocybin mushrooms. Everybody's like, oh yeah, psychedelics, we're gonna go have a big party, and get screwed up. And that was not what I wasn't looking at that at all. And I didn't know why this particular medicine just kept calling to me, but I listened, right? So lo and behold, some mushrooms found me in 2013. I worked with the medicine a few times, and probably about my fifth or sixth time, I sensed there was something right there that I couldn't see, but I didn't know what it was spiritually. So there was May 19th, 2013. I call it my second birthday, y'all. I set an intention, show me what it is that I am not seeing. And I'm here to tell you, I had an experience that I, to this day, cannot put into words. But when I describe it, other people call it a spiritual awakening. So it was almost as if I was let off the hook. I saw the cosmic joke of it all. Like, I was everything and nothing. I was looking through another pair of eyes and realizing, oh my God, I was laughing. I was like, I have never had control over my life. I don't have control over my life now, and I am never going to have control over my life. Like, my job is to be willing to surrender to that knowing and deeply listen to what I am being guided to do next. And I came out of that experience going, holy crap, what do I do with this, right? Because I realized very, very quickly, I actually have to choose to live now what I now know. And that's a really different way of navigating life than how I had been navigating life before. And I'm here to tell you everything from that day up until this very moment of my life has been in service to what I experienced that night in May of 2013. It was that much of a profound experience for me. From there, I had no language for it. I didn't know anybody who had experienced anything like this, nothing. And again, I'm not going to church. I don't have a spiritual framework to orient towards. So I am back at the tracker school and meditating out in the woods again. I'm like, where do I go next? And then in 2014, synchronicities happened again. And I found this amazing program out on the West Coast called the Ecology of Awakening. And it was the first time I ever saw a program that was merging nature connection with spirituality in a way that I understood it. And it was a year-long program. I had to go out to the West Coast 4 times. I had to start a GoFundMe site. I did not have the money to afford this, but it all somehow worked out. And for a whole year, there was a group of 12 of us that met 4 times a year in each season in a different ecological zone of California. And the third meeting was another Vision Fast ceremony in the Mojave Desert this time in the Granite Mountains. And so as part of that, again, 1 gallon of water, 4 days and 4 nights, not eating, out in nature. It snowed on us in the desert. And my intention for that Vision Fast, because of everything else that had happened up to that point, was total and complete surrender. Like I said it, it was witnessed, I meant it, and I knew I was probably signing myself up for not an easy journey. But I also knew that was the most authentic, the most heart-centered choice and intention that I can make. It was the only thing that felt right to me. And came out of that, music came back into my life. I'm now composing again. I have my own YouTube channel. I'm doing gigs. And my work started shifting, right? I had basically served in every kind of capacity that I could in the field of sexual and domestic violence up to this point. You know, an advocate of sexual violence. I went to state government, worked at a domestic violence shelter, but like none of this was resonating. And I ended up forming my own nonprofit in 2015 called the Center for Earth-Based Healing, because I knew, my God, the earth, that's how we connect back to ourselves. That's it, right? For me, it was. And I want to share this knowledge, and I want to create these sacred spaces where people get a chance to do this. Because on the East Coast, y'all, we don't do this. On the West Coast, it's saturated with people who get this. I want to bring it here. So I ended up writing my very first grant application, and I got a federal grant for 3 years that funded my organization so that we could offer nature-based programs for survivors of interpersonal violence. And it was, wildly successful. After I did a lot of outreach and training, all of a sudden we're getting 3 times the number of applicants, and it was working. And then in 2019, unexpectedly lost funding, and everything came to a halt. Everything about that nonprofit work, everything came to a halt. And that brings me now to the very last part of my story, which is the last 2 years, because then 2020 arrived. And I don't think I can say that to any of you and without people going, oh yeah, 2020 arrived. So, at the end of 2019, no more nonprofit work, but we decided to push pause, hanging on to our resources that we still had, and revision the whole thing. I'm like, okay, we got to rethink this. I still believe in this work. I started working at a domestic violence shelter in October of 2019 as the creative counselor. So I was using music and painting and eco healing with clients from the age of 6 all the way up to the age of 72. But there was something in me that was starting to realize that I was no longer feeling aligned with that career, which was super scary because it was the only career I'd ever felt aligned with and that I ever loved. So end of 2019, everything's on pause, gonna revision, gonna figure this out. And then 2020 arrives, y'all. So I did not see any of this coming. I had 14 good days of 2020, just 14, before basically the shit hit the fan. On January 15th of 2020, I had to make a 911 call for the first time in my life. I suffered a severe and spontaneous, meaning out of the blue, spinal injury. And I could not walk for the first 3 months of 2020. I was in bed, having to lay on my left side only for 3 months of the beginning of 2020 until I could have spinal neurosurgery, the March equinox actually of 2020. So this is, of course, right when this pandemic is starting to get, people are canceling surgeries because it's not safe. And here I am saying, I got to have the surgery or I can't walk and I can't work and I can't feed myself. I'm single. I live by myself out in the woods, right? So that happened in January. I had spinal neurosurgery. It was successful. I can walk again, but the injury is such that it is making it impossible for me to run those nature-based camps that I once used to run, because I can't wear a backpack anymore. I will never backpack again. I can't lift and load boxes. I can't even walk more than a mile right now. I'm still working on it. So like it radically changed my life just like that. Physically can't do that work anymore. Like the universe was like, okay, we're going to have to make it impossible for her to go back and do this. She's going to try. I'm going back. It's April of 2020. I'm an essential worker. I got signed off to go back to work at the domestic violence shelter. So I'm working, as an essential worker in a domestic violence shelter. It was very stressful and very scary. October of 2020, we had moved my mom up to Charlottesville in 2019 to be closer to me because she's aging. In October of 2020, she got the news that her breast cancer came back, and she had to have a radical mastectomy of her left breast in October of 2020. And I'm her person, so I'm there with her helping us through all this. And October 13th was the night before her surgery. She had to quit drinking for the surgery. And do you all know, miraculously, she has not picked up a drink since. So I got my mother back, y'all. I got my mom back. And we had worked through a lot, and boundaries were having to be set. And she knew I was not going to tolerate certain behaviors when she was drinking. And so we had figured it out enough, but it still was hard. But then after she came out of the surgery, she said, nope, I'm not going to. And to this day, she is still sober, and it has absolutely transformed my relationship with her. And we have the best time now, and we laugh. She's 70. She has COPD and diabetes. And mobility is hard for her, but we just have the best time together. And I can't tell you how grateful I am for that. I feel like I have done the hard work of healing my matriarchal line, because there was generation after generation after generation of trauma and abuse in that family. And somehow, some way, my mom and we did it. So I am super grateful for that. And then I fast forward to May of 2021. My mom survived, the surgery. She's fine, no cancer. And I'm still working at the domestic violence shelter. So May of 2020 of this year, I find out that my position at the domestic violence shelter is being eliminated due to loss of funding. So as of July 1st of this year, I became unemployed. I am still unemployed, on unemployment, rent relief, food stamps, the whole thing. Like, how did I get here, y'all? I just can't even believe it in some ways. But then in other ways, I can totally believe it, right? Also, in May of 2021, my sister came out to visit my mom for the first time. And my sister and I saw each other, and I hosted them at my home for the first time in 10 years. So like, something's, I think we're both trying to be very careful about how we navigate this. I will not have another toxic relationship with her. So I'd rather not have a relationship if that's where it's going to go. But so far, so good. She's actually coming back out again next week, 2 weeks from now. So I'm grateful that we have been able to reconnect, but I'm doing it cautiously. There's a lot of baggage between us, but I am grateful that we could meet again. And so basically what has happened is, yeah, I'm unemployed, or as I like to say, fun employed. I'm trying to have a good attitude about this. And other things are starting to happen now, right? My nonprofit, the Center for Earth-Based Healing, we did revision it. Somehow, some way, that happened too. I'm now offering one-day eco-healing retreats for any small group. I am no longer working specifically with survivors of sexual and domestic violence. When I lost my job, that was it for me. I was ready to turn away from that particular kind of work. It was time. Land, and a person and a friend who has land and a nonprofit found me, and we have a space. Music has come into my life again in a way that's kind of crazy. I am an internationally competitive musical whistler. No joke, y'all. Had no idea that that was a thing until a couple of years ago. But I got a gig about a month ago, and now I'm getting another gig, I think in 2 weeks because of this. So I'm saying yes. I'm just saying yes to anything that feels like go that direction, right? And then lastly, I was contacted because of a mutual friend by the University of Virginia's HIV, nobody knows about this, by the way, the Ryan White HIV clinic at UVA. And the director of that clinic, she had someone donate money, and they said, do something different with this for the patients. Like, don't do the normal thing. Well, one of her colleagues knew me and introduced us. And next week, I am handing them a 6-week eco-healing program, a virtual program that I have designed to use with HIV patients based on the earth elements. And we're going to do what's called a proof of concept study on it, because nobody's ever tried this stuff before with HIV patients. And I'm getting paid a little bit of money for this. So, my life has shifted so radically to, I am now in this place, y'all. I am both terrified that I am on unemployment and it ends in December and I don't know what's happening next. Like, I literally have an air mattress and a tent that fits the back of my pickup truck. That's my backup plan, okay? And at the same time, it is the most exhilarating moment because anything and everything is possible right now. And so I'm truly living that intention that I made in 2014 of surrendering to something that is way bigger than me and trusting that I'm going to be taken care of as long as I continue deeply listening and as long as I continue having the courage to do these things that I've never done before, and to believe in myself that I can, right? Like, what's the worst that can happen? I live in my truck. Okay, all right. I have been homeless before. I've lived in a tent before. So my family did. So, today I feel good. I feel enthusiastic. I feel optimistic. And at the same time, there's a part of me that is utterly terrified. And I believe, and this is the last thing I'm going to say, I believe being a spiritual being that I am, and I'm having this crazy, wild human experience, like, I want more. I want more. I want more. That impulse is driving me still. I can say that I will not have any regrets. If I die today, I will not have one regret. I have said yes to everything that I feel like I needed to say yes to. And so far, I've been okay. So it really, for me, comes back to reconnecting to myself, reconnecting to that wild woman, reconnecting to the part of me that knows I am fully capable of figuring this out. It It doesn't mean I don't ask for help. It doesn't mean I won't have friends. It doesn't mean I don't freak out. All of those things happen. I believe in embracing the whole human experience, including the shadow side. So I am not a Pollyanna. I don't sit there and act like I'm fine when I'm not. I feel my feelings. I cry every single day. And at the same time, what a wild life, an amazing, rich life I have had. And I am only 48 years old. So like, what's the next part of my life going to be like, right? So that is, yeah, that's it. This wild, crazy life I've had. And I do feel like spirit has been in the driver's seat the whole time, whether I realized it or not, So thank you for witnessing this. You are the first group of women to ever witness my story in this way. So I am really grateful. Thank you so much.
Oh, Michele, people who know me know that I'm seldom speechless. And you are just an amazing individual, and what an exciting story. Your enthusiasm has lifted me out of this kind of drizzly day, and the fortitude and positiveness of everything you've done is just awe-inspiring. I hope some others will have something to say.
Thank you.
Can I just say, I just love how, so I'm sure in your schooling, you know, the difference between victim mentality and creator mentality. And I just love that even though you phrase it as you're going for this wild ride, or you're on this, but you're not a victim. Like you are still the creator. You are still the hero, the superhero of your own story, even though, you know, we can't direct ever. I don't know. I just love it. So thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you. Yeah, you know, you're talking about the hero of your own story. I'm a huge Joseph Campbell fan, who wrote The Hero with 1,000 Faces. He is what a contributor he was to understanding the spiritual journey that we're all on. If you all are ever interested, there's a great documentary called Finding Joe, and it's free out there on the internet. I think that documentary saved my life at a couple of points in my journey. It reminded me of the bigger picture that I'm on. And I'm very grateful to Joseph Campbell for having done the work he did. We're all heroes, by the way, of our own journeys.
Michele, I appreciate, and one of the notes I made was, let's see, recognize that in most things, in most of life, we don't have control. Surrender to that fact and start listening. And I spend a lot of my life trying to plan, control, and shape things and people and events around me. And it's hard to let go of that.
Yeah, well, you and everybody else, and me included, we're taught that, right? Especially as women, be the people pleaser, take care of everybody else. I mean,
Yeah.
we are conditioned, culturally conditioned to control things. And it's not to say we just sit back and life just falls into our laps, right? There is a certain amount of like, we have to make certain decisions. We have to, you know, so it's this dance. I talk about it as like I'm dancing with my invisible dance partner. You know, like, oh, universe, oh, I'm unemployed. Well, there's your step. Now, where's my step? You know, what's my next dance step that I'm going to do in response to that? So I feel like there's a dance that's happening back and forth between the divine and me. And my job really is, I've gotten to the point, I used to be a very anxious person, couldn't tolerate how it felt in my body to be anxious or scared or did not have things settled. So I would make impulsive choices to try to control so that I would feel better in my body. And I have done a lot of work around being able to embody my own life. That's really what it comes down to. The more we can expand into embodying all of life as it shows up, including the stuff that doesn't feel good, then that allows us to start realizing I'm still okay. I'm still okay. I'm still okay. I can let go of this control and just start listening. And I've gotten to the point now where if I do not have 100% clarity on a decision that I have to make, I will not make it until I have that clarity. And the only time I don't do that is if there's like a deadline, right? So I'm going to be honest with y'all. I didn't know how I was going to tell the story, but I took it very seriously, and I didn't want to just get on here and ramble. I felt like I needed some intentionality behind it. And so I waited and I waited and I waited and I waited for the clarity to come about how I wanted this to come out, and how it wanted to come out is more truthful. And I knew last night when I went to bed, this was it. You know, no other answer had arrived. And so I waited until I had that clarity. And that's pretty much how I'm navigating most things now. But it's not always easy.
Crystal?
Thank you. Thank you for unmuting me. I'm Crystal. I reside in Virginia. Right now I'm in Pennsylvania, listening to this while I'm packing up my hotel room, where I've been for a week. And I've been here because of work. And I've also been here to look at trails and parks because I'm a great manager. And I went to the AT Museum. So kudos to you. I've done a lot of sections of it. And truly, I have utmost admiration for people that do that trail. And additionally, I'm a woman at a big crux in my life. And every single thing you've said today really relates to where I'm at. I just want to thank you so sincerely. You've really helped me more than I can say. If you have any links to your program, please type them so that I can take a screenshot and look into them later. Thank you so much.
Okay. Yeah, I'll make sure some information is passed on. Yeah, thank you, Crystal. Hang in there. Feel your feelings, honor you. The answers will come. I just think so many people, particularly women that I know right now, are in these big, like, kind of moments, big shifts, big changes. And y'all, we can do this. You can do this. Whatever it is that you're being asked to do, you can do this. I believe it. I really do.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thanks for the organizers too. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Michele, when we end this meeting, which doesn't have to happen immediately, but will you stay on and we'll write down some of the things that I've tried to keep track and links, and then I'll send out an email to everybody so that they can use some of those resources.
Sure will.
Thanks.
Michele. Oh, go ahead, Natalie. I'll wait.
Okay, because this is a tribute to your mother, Winona. Michele, the word synchronicity is a word that Winona's mother, Edie Head, used. What she said, there aren't the other word, aren't
Coincidences.
It's synchronous. And you use that word at least 3 or 4 times throughout your talk. And it's synchronous when I think about it and I'm saying to myself, oh, it's a coincidence. I said, no, there's a synchronicity. And usually it comes around within a few days what that synchronicity was or is. And I'll stop in a second, but for me, one of the things of synchronicity is when I get lost, like traveling or something. I end up someplace I'm thinking, how did I get here? What am I doing here? I know that in the near future, I'm going to be there again, maybe lost again, but I've been there before, so I know what to do this time. So I just want to talk about that particular word and my personal experience with it.
Yeah, I really appreciate that you picked up on that, Natalie. Synchronicity, to me, those are the moments when the divine makes itself known in a physical, lived human way. So like even how I found the Appalachian Trail, y'all, I was living in Michigan. I had never heard of the Appalachian Trail, ever. Didn't even know it existed. And out of the blue, a friend of mine mailed me Bill Bryson's book, A Walk in the Woods, which is about his hike. It's a hilarious book. And that book sat on a table for months in my room. And then one day I picked it up and I was like, oh, what is this about? And I started reading it and I'm like, what is the Appalachian Trail? What is this? And that's how I found that trail. And that all happened right at the same time that the schooling stuff is starting to just, you know, push me under the ground with like, whoa, what is happening in the world, right? So like I couldn't have, those are the things that I always go back and look for if I doubt that there is a God. Because I could not have made that happen. And yet that one decision, that one friend to mail me that book, and she had read the book, and she would just send me stuff that she read that she thought I might enjoy. And she hadn't sent me a book in years. And she sent me that book. And then that was the reason I found the AT. And then the rest is history. So I think it's really important to go back and reflect on our lives and find the moments when those kinds of things happen, because those are the moments when the divine is literally saying, go that way, go that way.
I'm I'm a writer, but I came to it fairly late in life. I had to wait till I was retired to find the time, and I write about women and dysfunctional families and alcoholism and all sorts of other things. But you made me laugh when you talked about regrets, no regrets, because the current book I'm working on, the narrator is saying that she wants to start a group called Regretaholics, where they can all sit around and say, you know, get over it, move on, no regrets, no regrets. So that just made me laugh.
That's funny. Well, kudos to you, Patty, for embracing your creativity at whatever place in your life that it could show up, and not pushing that away. You know, the script would say, oh, it's too late for me to start, you know, kudos to you for following that impulse. It's never too late.
Michele, I just can't thank you enough. And I have to tell Natalie that I think my mom would like for her name to be invoked during this morning session. Mine is, you know, synchronicity is a word that my mom used a lot, and she was passionate about how we could tap into our spirituality and connect to each other and love the world better. She was passionate about that. And what a wonderful way for us to start our first session this season with you bringing your light and your passion and your journey and being willing and to share it with us. I just appreciate that so much. We read this book, another book, Canoeing the Mountains, about how can we live better? How can we do it better? And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to do it better. And so I just can't say thank you enough. We're trying to do it better. We're trying. Thank you.
Thank you, Anana. Yeah, no, we are living in an unprecedented time, y'all. I never thought I would be living in a time with a pandemic and the upheaval of our social fabric. And at the same time, it needs to happen. Because if there's anything my story shows, and I think all of you could probably see this pattern in your own lives, like before we can create something new and better and more loving and equal and compassionate, what we got going on, it's got to crumble first. And I really do believe that we are in a collective rite of passage where we crossed a threshold. That pandemic was the triggering catalyst right there. It was a catalyst that halted our sense of normal life. And all of a sudden, the Band-Aid started getting ripped off in some pretty brutal ways of the social inequities, the racial inequities, all of the inequity, all the ways that we continue not treating one another as equally valuable. All of this started becoming even more exposed. And, you know, on NPR now, I noticed the other day, almost every conversation is at least including overlaying how this issue affects people of color or this group of people who have been oppressed. So a shift is happening, y'all. We're part of it. But it's messy and it's hard. And, you know, I think more than ever, it is so important to give yourself time to unplug and take care of yourself. You have to do it. You have to do it. We need you. Like, if you're willing to spend a Saturday morning doing this, then we need you. I need you to be doing what you're doing. And you can't do that, and I can't do what I do if I don't take care of myself. And you know, what that means is different to everybody, but for me, the big motto now is be still, be quiet. You know, learn to play again. I realized the other day, I'm like, God, Michelle, you're so boring. You're like, you're just work all the time. It's like, go have some fun. So I'm now kind of focusing a little bit on, like, how do I bring more joy? Where can I find those little moments in my workday? And how do I play again? How do I go find that part of me? It's been a while. So yeah, I really hope every single one of you just take extra good care of yourselves. We are giving birth to something collectively. I believe it. And we may see it or we may not. I don't know. It depends on how long it takes us to get it together. People are complicated.
I think you're a prophet of our time, and I so appreciate your words of wisdom. I'm involved in a lot of different kinds of reading, and you've hit every major topic that I've been studying, and you are a prophet, and I hope you're listening.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. Thank you so much. Truly, I'm so deeply honored to have you all bear witness to this story. And I know I'm looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
Actually, there are 20. We've had up to
17,
22
18,
participants. Yep.
Yeah, you know what? And I know that there are 21 other equally touching, amazing stories waiting to be told. I really do believe that. Like, so I honor all of you and your stories and the great, vast wisdom that's sitting in this little group right here, right now. Yeah, it's a unprecedented time. So I truly, it's the best way to start off my Saturday morning was this. Thank you.
Thank you. And Winona, can you bring our Saturday morning to an appropriate ending?
Yes, I will. Thank you, all of you, for being here. I'm going to close today with Enoch's prayer, Walking with God. I speak to you, be still, know I am God. I spoke to you when you were born, be still, know I am God. I spoke to you at your first sight, be still, know I am God. I spoke to you at your first word, be still, know I am God. I spoke to you at your first thought, be still, know I am God. I spoke to you at your first song, be still, know I am God. I speak to you through the grass of the meadows, be still, know I am God. I speak to you through the trees of the forest, be still, know I am God. I speak to you through the holy mountains, be still, know I am God. I speak to you through the rain and the snow, be still, know I am God. I speak to you through the dew of the morning, be still, know I am God. I speak to you through the peace of the evening, be still, know I am God. I speak to you through the splendor of the sun, be still, know I am God. I speak to you through the brilliant stars, be still, know I am God. I speak to you through the storm and the clouds, be still, know I am God. I speak to you through the thunder and lightning, be still, know I am God. I speak to you through the mysterious rainbow, be still, know I am God. I will speak to you when you are alone, be still, know I am God. I will speak to you through the wisdom of the ancients, be still, know I am God. I will speak to you at the end of time, be still, Know I am God. I will speak to you when you have seen my angels. Be still. Know I am God. I will speak to you throughout eternity. Be still. Know I am God. I speak to you. Be still. Know I am God. Amen.
Amen.
Blessings, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. Hope I see you in November. If you block me on your email, I know I've overdone it. Please invite others.